Get out, the Duke of Marchwood said, very low, to the empty doorway. All of you, get out and leave me to it. There was no one in the doorway. There had been no one for some time. Emmett stood in the cold great hall of Marchwood at the dead middle of the night, a guttered candle in his hand, and listened to the silence of a house that, he slowly understood, had emptied itself around him. They had been leaving for weeks. He had known it dimly, the way a man drowning knows there is a shore somewhere. First the upper housemaids, then the footman, then old Pruett the butler who had served his father, all of them gone, with their wages and their stammered excuses and their eyes that would not meet his, driven out by his black silences and his blacker rages, by the unbearable thing he had become since the fever took Clara in the spring. He could not blame them. He could barely stand to be in a room with himself. He had thrown a decanter at a wall a week past, not at any man, but at the wall, at the world, and the sound of the last of the staff packing in the night had followed soon after. He had wanted them gone. He had wanted everyone gone. And now they were, and the house was a tomb, and the dust was creeping over Clara's pianoforte and Clara's chairs, and the long table where she had laughed, and the great rooms were shrouded in white covers like 100 small ghosts, and Emmett stood in the middle of it all, and discovered that getting what he wanted had hollowed him out entirely. Then he saw the light. It was far down the east passage, low and warm, a single candle, moving. He went toward it because he could not help himself, because in all that darkness it was the only living thing, and at the end of the passage he found the door to the small morning room open, and within it, on her knees at the cold hearth, a young woman in a grey servant's dress was quietly laying a fire. He stopped in the doorway. He did not know her name. He was not certain he had ever truly looked at her, one of the lower housemaids, the kind of girl a great house swallows, seen and not seen, there to carry coal and disappear. She was perhaps 24, with a plain, gentle face and brown hair pinned simply beneath a white cap, and her hands were red with cold, and she was building him a fire in the small hours of the morning in a house. Everyone else had fled. "You," he said. His voice came out cracked from disuse and grief. "Why are you still here?" She did not startle, though he had given her every cause to. She finished setting the kindling, and struck a light, and only when the small flame had caught and steadied did she rise and turn to him, and fold her hands. "Someone must lay the fires, your grace," she said. "The nights have turned cold." "The others have gone, all of them." "Yes, your grace." "Then why have you not?" She looked at him, not with fear, and not with the awful pity he had learned to dread, but with a plain, steady directness, as one looks at a thing one has decided about. "Because you should not be alone in a cold house," she said simply. "Whatever else is true, no one should." And then she curtsied and took up her candle and went quietly past him to lay the next fire, leaving him standing in the small new warmth she had made, with no answer at all. Her name was Esther Coombe. He learned it slowly, over the strange grey weeks that followed, because she gave him no occasion to learn it quickly. She asked nothing of him, demanded nothing, pressed at nothing. She simply stayed and worked, and was there. She could not, of course, keep a great house alone, and she did not try. What she did instead was quietly impossible. She kept alive the small warm heart of it, while the rest fell into shadow. There was always a fire in the room he was in, though he never asked for one and could not think how she knew. There was always a plain hot meal left where he would find it, and taken away again, eaten or not, without a word of reproach. The worst of the dust was kept from Clara's pianoforte. When he raged, and he still raged, in those early days, the grief coming over him like a black tide, she did not flee as the others had, and she did not argue, and she did not weep. She would wait, very still, in the corner of the room until the storm had spent itself, and then she would right the chair he had knocked over, and quietly bring him something warm and go, as though his grief were weather, as though it would pass, and she meant to be there, dry and steady when it did. He could not understand her. He told himself she stayed for the wages, but he had not paid her in a month, and she said nothing of it. He told himself she stayed because she had nowhere else, but he saw the quality of her, the intelligence in her quiet, the dignity in her plain dress, and did not believe it. One night, half mad with the silence, he had said to her cruelly, "You may as well go like the rest. There is nothing here for you. I am not a man any longer. I am a ruin with a title." And Esther had looked at him and said, "I have tended ruins before, your grace." My mother at the end was not herself either, for the pain of her illness, and said hard things she did not mean, to the only person left to hear them. I did not leave her. One does not leave a person because the grief has made them ugly. The grief is not the person. It only sits on top of them a while. She had picked up the cold cup at his elbow. "You are still under there. I have seen you. I can wait." He had no reply to that. He found, to his shame, that his eyes had filled for the first time since the funeral, and he had turned away so she would not see, and when he turned back she had gone, leaving him alone with the first clean grief he had felt in months, the kind that washes rather than poisons. After that, something began very slowly to change. He started to look for her. He told himself it was to give orders, but he gave no orders worth the name. He only wanted, he came to realize, to be in the room where she was, because the air there was easier to breathe. He began to take the meals she left, and then to take them while she was still there, and then, haltingly, like a man relearning a language, to speak to her while he ate. She answered plainly and well. She had read more than a housemaid had any business reading. She had opinions, offered only when asked, and they were good ones. She had a dry, gentle humor that surfaced rarely, and that he came to wait for like sun through cloud. He found himself telling her about Clara. He had not been able to speak of his wife to a living soul. The words had been locked in him like a stone festering, but Esther asked nothing, and so somehow he could give everything. And one grey afternoon by the fire he began to talk, and could not stop. He told her how Clara had laughed, and how she had filled the house with music, and how the silence after had nearly killed him. Esther listened. She did not offer comfort, which he could not have borne. She did not say it would pass, or that Clara was at peace, or any of the hollow things people say. She only listened, with her whole quiet self, as though his dead wife were worth the hearing of, and when he had finished she said softly, "She sounds as though she was very easy to love. You were fortunate in each other. Not everyone is, even once." "And you?" he asked, surprising himself. "Has there been anyone, for you, easy to love?" A shadow crossed her face, and was mastered. "There has not been much room in my life for it," she said. "There has been a great deal of tending of others, and not much else. I do not complain of it. It is what I am good at." She rose to see to the fire. "Some of us are made to keep the warmth in the house for other people. It is not a small thing to be that. I have made my peace with being that." And Emmet, watching her stir the coals, her plain face gold in the firelight, felt something turn over in his chest that he had thought was dead forever. A sudden, fierce wish that she should not have to make her peace with so little, that someone should keep the warmth for her for once instead. The house came back to life by degrees, and it was her doing, though she would never have claimed it. He wrote, at last, to bring back what staff would come, and some did sheepishly, and found a different house than the one they had fled, and a different master, quieter, steadier, who no longer raged, and who treated the plain maid called Coombe with a careful regard that puzzled them all. The white covers came off the furniture. The dust left Clara's pianoforte, and one evening Emmet opened it and touched the keys for the first time since the spring, clumsily, and Esther stood in the doorway with her hands full of linen and listened, and neither of them said anything, but he knew she understood what it had cost him and what it meant. He began to court her, though he hardly knew that was what he was doing, and certainly she did not. He gave her the afternoons free, and was absurdly pleased when she spent them in the library rather than away from the house. He found small reasons to walk where she walked. He noticed everything about her now, the few strands of brown hair that always escaped her cap, the way she pressed her lips together when she was thinking, the gentleness in her hands. He who had been a ruin found himself wanting to be a man again for her, around her, because of her. It was the returning butler, Pruett, who forced his hand, all unknowing. "Beg pardon, your grace," the old man said one morning, troubled, "but it isn't quite proper, the talk below stairs. About the regard your grace shows the girl Coombe. It does her no kindness, you understand, to be singled so. Folk will say things. Perhaps it would be better if she were found a place elsewhere, for her own sake, before her name takes harm." And Emmett understood, with a jolt, that he had been on the verge of letting her drift quietly out of his life to spare her reputation, letting the one person who had not abandoned him be sent away for the crime of his own carelessness. The thought was unbearable. He found her in the morning room, the room where she had first laid him a fire in the dark. "Esther," he said, "sit down, please. I must say something to you, and I find I am afraid to say it, which I have not been afraid of anything in a long while." She sat, her hands folded, watching him with that steady grey gaze. "When the whole world left me," he said, "you stayed. When I was at my worst, when I was cruel and broken and not worth the staying, you laid me fires in the dark and waited out my rages and listened to my grief as though I were still a man worth the trouble. You did not flee, and you did not pity me, and you did not ask one thing in return. I do not know how to tell you what that has been to me. I was drowning, Esther, and you were the only light in the house, and I followed it, and you brought me back to life. You brought me back to life." Her composure trembled. "I only did what was right, your grace. Anyone?" "No," he said, "not anyone. The others ran. You alone stayed. And it was not duty that kept you, whatever you tell yourself. It was the truest, kindest heart I have ever known, and I have been so slow, so blind to say what I have come to feel." He came and knelt before her chair, this proud grieving duke on his knees before a housemaid, and took her cold hands in his. "You said once that some people are made to keep the warmth in the house for others, and have made their peace with little. I will not have it. I will not have you keep my warmth and go cold yourself. Let me keep yours. Let me spend the rest of my life keeping it. Marry me, Esther, not as a servant. As my wife, as the woman who walked into the dark when everyone else walked out, and saved me." She was weeping now, silently, the way he had once wept, turned away from her. "Your grace, Emmett, you are grieving still. You may wake one day and find this was only gratitude, only a drowning man clutching at." "I have asked myself that," he said gently, in the night, honestly, again and again, "and it is not so. I loved Clara, and I will always carry her, and that is a true thing and a finished thing. This is another true thing, beginning. The heart is not so small that there is only room in it for one love in a life. You taught me that, the day you told me the grief was not the man. There is room. There is room for you, and I want no one else to fill it, now or ever. I am not clutching, Esther. I am choosing. With my whole healed heart, I am choosing you." For a long moment she only looked at him, the firelight on her wet face, as though she could not let herself believe that the tending was over, that someone had come at last to tend her. "I stayed," she whispered, "because I could not bear to think of you alone in the cold and dark. I think I loved you even then, before there's any sense in it, when there was nothing in it for me, but the work and the silence. I never let myself hope. People like me do not hope for this." "Then hope," he said, and lifted her hands to his lips. "Hope, and have it. You shall never want for anything again, least of all for being loved. You will be cherished, Esther Coombe, every day of your life, by a man who knows exactly what he was spared from and exactly who spared him." And the Duke of Marchwood drew the quiet maid who had refused to leave him up out of her chair and into his arms, there in the small warm room where it had all begun, and for the first time in longer than he could remember the great house of Marchwood was not a tomb at all, but a home. They were married in the autumn, and the house that had emptied itself in his grief filled again, with light and music, for he learned to play again, and she learned beside him, and in time with other small voices and small footsteps, and all the warmth two people can make between them. The white covers were folded away for good. Clara's pianoforte was played and loved, and not forgotten, for Esther would have it no other way. She had no fear of his first love, only a deep tenderness for the man it had shaped. And on the cold nights, when the wind came off the hills and rattled the old windows of Marchwood, the Duke would sometimes wake and find his wife already up, laying a fire against the chill out of an old, deep habit of keeping others warm, and he would rise, and take the kindling gently from her red hands, and build it himself, and draw her back to the warmth, and hold her there. Because she had walked into the dark for him when no one else would, and he had promised her, and meant it with all that was in him, that she would never, ever be cold or alone again,